Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Hockey Writers Fantasy Forecheck podcast. As always, I am your host, Jacob Strozyk,
And
joined by my basement-dwelling Atlantic partner in crime.
I almost jumped the gun on that one. I'm Jacob Billington.
Almost, almost, but that's okay. We're here, we're excited, and we're ready to rumble. Um, as always, today we're going to run through some fantasy trends for the week, get you some players, teams to be looking at. But before we get started, we're going to do our question of the week, and this one's a little bit specific, so we might have to go through a couple of scenarios with this one.
Okay.
Um, are you more likely to take a chance on a good player that's on a bad team that might keep producing, or an average player on a good team that's kind of streaky? And the for instance I have immediately in front of me is somebody like Tomas Hertl or Mikael Granlund versus like Jake DeBrusk.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna go in that situation. I'll go with Jake DeBrusk, or the player that's on the good team, just because he's surrounded by so much talent and anything can happen. Now, when you look at Hurdle or Granlund or whoever you want to use in your fantasy for this, get it?
Uh,
um, whoever you want to use as your example, they're probably going to cool off. Those are the streaky players, right? Like you look at Ottawa and Buffalo through the rebuild. How many streaky players like do you look at and say, man, this would be really good for fantasy this week if I could have forecasted that this player was going to have the week. But then you look at DeBrusk and he's going to finish the year with so much more points and all that kind of stuff in your fantasy league. So I'm going to go with the average player, and I hate to call it DeBrusk average. I would say slightly above average, but
we're, we're
um,
we're saying it's quote unquote average in fantasy comparable to most other high end players because he's not an average player. He's an average fantasy player.
yeah, that's fair. But yeah, I'll go with DeBrusk or whoever you want to compare to.
So, what would be the scenario where you would take the good player on a bad team?
If they're like 8 points in their last 10, then I'll have a look at them. I'm very lenient on, or I'm hesitant, sorry, to go after those bad players, and especially because plus minus is just as valuable as goals in a category
Hmm.
league, right? They're gonna suffer in the plus minus. So if they're getting 8 points in their last 10, and DeBrusk or whoever has 6 or 7 in the last 10, but has the significantly higher plus minus, and the rest of the stats are pretty much the same, I'm gonna go with I'll take the 2 point deficit and make sure that I'm still not losing in the cat or in the plus minus.
Yeah, that's kind of the point that I was going to drive at is plus minus people tend to forget about. And it's a stat that you can really get some headway on. Maybe not so much in points leagues. It really depends on how much value plus minus has in a points league. I don't know many that do more than maybe like half a point for a plus minus both ways.
Yeah.
But even then, you're getting hard pressed for negative points if it's sitting at a point 0.5 margin. So it's a bit tougher. But in the category league, you're right. It has that same exact value as a goal or an assist or a point, however your league is designed. So I've been going back and forth while I was looking at different fantasy players throughout the week and doing my trends and picking up and dropping players. And I was like, I keep running across all of these good players on bad teams. Why is nobody picking them up? And then you
Yeah.
dip into the advanced reasons why. And this is kind of why I want to have the little mini discussion about it.
Yeah.
All
I have a
right.
question of the week for you.
Oh, hit me. Let's do it.
Are are you out shoveling?
No, the bulldozers are still going through my apartment's parking lot. I haven't had a chance to get out there yet. I'm
You're
lucky my
not
power came back on.
you're not out clearing out the Bills stadium for them?
Even though I'm right down the road from it, absolutely not. They're paying less than my actual job pays me, so I'll just stay at home and be warm and get paid for what I actually do.
Uh,
So they can enjoy their shoveling. I know the game started. I have no idea what the score is at the moment, though.
are you a football guy?
Not necessarily, but being a hometown guy, I'll cheer for the Bills.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I know a lot more people are into football than me, but hockey's my sport. That's what I dive my life into.
Well, just to cheer you up, they're up 14 still in the first quarter.
That sounds spectacular. Maybe all of that heat will just exude its way down towards me from all those people, and it'll melt the snow faster.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. Alrighty. Well, do we want to stick with the new year, new us trend of doing downtrend first, or you want to go back to uptrend first?
Sure, let's be negative Nellies.
Negative Nellies. All right, downtrends. I have three, and one I think is going to make you feel bad, but I don't know how many you got.
All right, I got three as well. So why don't you start us off?
All right, I'll start with the one that might hurt you, and it's Travis Sanheim because I know you've been high on him all year. But while I was looking at him, he's only got 1 point in his last 10 games, and that's not to discount the hot start he had. It just means he's slumping right now.
Yeah.
I have confidence he'll pick it back up, but as far as who to sit, who to start, Phillies, they're not a bad team, but they're not a great team either. So
Yeah.
if you have other players that are slightly above him, I'd say sit him versus start right now until he gets that heat back up. But I have confidence he'll do it. Just right now, he isn't.
Yeah, and like he is contributing in other ways. He's getting 2 to 4 shots a game, 1 to 3 blocks a game. Like he is still valuable and certainly not a drop candidate.
No, definitely not.
There's a good trade available right now. Maybe look at that. But no, he's definitely on a bit of a cold streak. And who knows, Jamie Drysdale. I think we're going to talk about him a little bit later. But with him coming in the lineup, maybe he might take some more of the offense and we'll see how it goes with Sanheim, but I've definitely had him on my radar. Just kind of still got him on my lineup and just gonna see how things go for the next week or two and reevaluate then.
Yeah, I knew it was gonna hurt you just a little bit, but I didn't want to full blown offend you and say drop him, because it's not worth dropping. He's worth holding on to because you're right. He contributes in other ways. It's just right now the points where you're getting those extra, categories out of him or those extra points, you're not getting them right now.
Right. I am gonna go with actually I've got two, so why don't you give me another one? I'm gonna clump two together. So
Oh, okay, okay. Then my other two are kind of a clump themselves as they're kind of similar, but I'll still run it either way. I have Tom Wilson from the Washington Capitals, 1 point in his last 12 games. 1 point.
Ooh.
Now he's another one of those players that he contributes in other ways. He gets the hits. He's shooting. He's got over 100 shots right now, so he's putting the puck on net, but it's not
Yeah.
going in for him, and he's not getting any of the extra assists and contributing offensively. And he's normally worth a decent amount for his offensive production. But as of right now, he's a depth character for what he contributes in the peripherals as opposed to a primary player, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah. He's one of those guys that if he's not scoring, I don't want him on my team. Right. Like he definitely does add those secondary assets like you were talking about. But I don't know. He's one of those guys that he can be just as valuable as Brady Kachuk, right? If he's having a good year. Now he's not going to score as many points or
No.
do all the things that Brady Kachuk does, but go back to our preseason videos and we were extremely high on Brady Kachuk, right? So he's like Brady Kachuk light in fantasy. But when he's not scoring, he's just not scoring. Like there's only so much you can really do because scoring, whether it's goals and assists or endpoints, that's three categories versus the shots and hits versus that are his two. And if he's not putting in any work in those three categories, then there's just not much going for you.
Yeah, it's a rough time.
Okay, so my two that I'm gonna clump together,
All right.
as somebody who covers the Ottawa Senators, we are born to not like the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I'm gonna go with Matt Nyes and Max Domi.
Okay.
So Matthew Nyes has 2 points in his last 9 games, which he was off to a good start. And listen, he is physical, he is getting some opportunities, but now he's down on the fourth line as the left winger, playing with I believe it was David Camp and I don't even know who their fourth line right winger would be because Yaron Croak was out. Um, but yeah, he doesn't have good line mates now. He's not going to be out there getting the offense. He's not going to be out there in the high offensive opportunities. And Max Domi only has 1 point in his last 6 games. Um, and he so the Leafs mixed up their lines a little bit. Sheldon Keefe decided to throw everything in a blender. So now Domi is with I don't know who the left winger is, but he's with Marner on the right side. So that could spark him a little bit. That could cause some, but for right now, I think both of them are in my drop category. I'm not looking to hang on to either of them while they're not producing.
Yeah, Domi a few years ago, I might have made a case for, holding on to him even in this scenario.
Yeah,
But in recent seasons, he just doesn't do much in the peripheral categories. He's really just, is he putting up points or is he not type
yeah,
player. He's not the same type of, multi-purpose pass that you could use in the depth part of your fantasy lineup. So I'm not gonna fight you on the Domi drop. I'll fight you a little bit on the Nyes drop just because I think he has potential to get back up in the lineup into higher portions of it.
yeah,
When the Leafs line shuffle ultimately flops, I think be somewhere back up in at least the middle six that he'll be producing, and he'll get the power play time that I think he deserves, and he'll get a little bit extra there. So I'm only really going to fight you on the Knives one as far as dropping. I would say don't drop. I'd lean more towards bench before drop for Knives.
fair enough. And I don't even have a rebuttal to that. Like I don't disagree at all. I would look for somebody that has been doing a little bit more as of late and find someone. But there is certainly a case to keep him.
Well, I have my last one, which it's the same type of player as Tom Wilson, and it's Evander Kane. Similar
Hmm.
scenario. He's got 3 points in his last 12 games. He's still getting hits. He's still getting shots, but he's kind of getting a little bit more of a lesser role in Edmonton as they've been heating up, and their top six is really flowing, and everything's kind of going well for them. He doesn't really have that same position that he did being one of their top forwards. Now he's kind of one of their middle six guys,
Yeah.
but I think he'll eventually come out of the slump. He typically is one of the better fantasy performers over the past handful of years, especially at his position. So if he starts getting hot again, start playing him. I wouldn't drop him under any scenario right now, but I wouldn't be playing him over some other guys because
Mhm.
similar to Wilson, if he's not scoring, he's basically like he's like Marcus Foligno 2.0.
Right. Right. And I mean, again, all the same things I just said about Wilson. Like, if he's not putting up those points, he's not he's being a disservice to your team, really, because he does have that potential. Might be a good time to look at trading him if somebody will look at him highly. But yeah, don't drop. He's still worth a good bit in fantasy.
Yeah, trade for sure. If someone's willing to take a betting chance that he can pick it back up and be the player that he was, sell him before you keep him.
Yeah. Last one I got on my list, and you know what? I think I mentioned him last week, but I'm going to say it again just because it's not been good. I'm going to go with Josh Norris. No points in his last 7 games. He's now out listed as day to day, but I don't know. I'm a bit concerned about the shoulder. He missed all but 5 games last year with a shoulder injury. Had shoulder surgery in January, just about a year ago. Um, and then still missed a good chunk. Well, not a good chunk, but all of training camp, preseason, and the first 3 games of the season. Right. So he's definitely got those injuries. I think it's a neck injury by the way he landed after the hit. Um, but he might have landed on his shoulder. I don't know. There hasn't been much information brought out about the injury, especially if he's injured. He's not going to do anything, and if it is a shoulder injury, he's probably done for the season.
Yeah, honestly, the with how close neck and shoulder injuries can really affect each other, because
Yep.
you've seen it. It's happened in so many other players, and it's it's tough to come back from that, let alone be productive
Yep.
at a rate that you're expected to be, especially for someone of his offensive caliber. So
Yep.
I'm starting to lean towards the drop candidacy at this point,
Yep.
and he might officially be able to be labeled injury prone at this point too.
Yeah. 100%. And it even goes back before his NHL days. Like he had a shoulder injury in college as well.
Yeah, that's not going to bode well. Hopefully, He can
Yeah,
come back from it. He can bounce back and everything goes okay.
yeah,
But from a pure fantasy perspective, starting to lean away from his value.
yeah. I agree.
As far as the teams that are cold, there's no need to retouch on the Sharks. Everybody knows that. So the Ducks and the Wild currently sit with a 2-7-1 record over the last 10 games, same exact record. And you look at the production out of some of their better players, and it's just not there. So, from a fantasy perspective, you're not getting a whole lot out of top players, and you're not getting much out of depth players either. Friggin' what was it? Wallstat got peppered in his debut and just got absolutely plastered for 7 goals.
Yeah,
So that's disappointing for dynasty leagues where you might be thinking, oh, Wallstedt might be one of my goalies of the future, and he gets one game, he gets sent down. It's not reassuring for that type of a scenario.
right. You look at those teams and you're just like, there's, I mean, obviously the Sharks are down there, the Blackhawks are down there. Those are two borderline AHL rosters. But then you look at the Ducks, and you look at the Wild, and you're like, okay, these are NHL teams, but they're just not doing good. Like you said, what are they, 2-7-1 in their last 10 each?
Yep.
That's there's just nothing going for them right now.
And it's hard to justify holding on to a lot of that. Granted, there are still star players that you could hold on to, but as a
Yeah.
whole, I'm starting to look at trades for players like that at this point.
Yeah. And I mean, with Kaprizov coming back from injury, I do expect the Wild to be better. I've expected them to be better all season, and they haven't. So that just like we're already at the halfway point of the season, which is insane. Um, but the Wild are just not a good team.
The Wild are doing what I expected Winnipeg to do,
I was
and
just
Winnipeg
gonna
is
say that.
doing what I expected the Wild to do. So I got my W's mixed up somewhere in the offseason, and I don't know how that happened, but we'll take it. We'll take our licking and move along into the season. All
Um,
right.
yeah.
What do you got? What do you say?
Moving on to my uptrend guys. I'm gonna
Yeah,
start
what
with
do you
Antti
got?
Raanta. He's got a
Okay.
947 plus save percentage in each of his last four straight starts since being called up from the AHL. No, sorry, I think he played one game, took a little break, and then these four starts. He's at a 947 plus in each of his last four games. This is typical Antti Raanta. He does this. He goes on these insane stretches of hockey. But yeah, right now is a great time to pick it up. Carolina's starting to do a lot better. They struggled out of the gate a little bit. They're climbing the ranks. Just kind of everything's going well for them right now, which is weird to say because there's always something that's not going well for them. So they're winning hockey games. Ranta's the starting goaltender again. Kochetkov he has a concussion, so it's all on Ranta now. Um, they need a backup goalie now, so it's Ranta for a while.
It's nice to see him back in the positive column and in the win column after how bad of a stretch he had that he had to get sent down. It's really refreshing and reassuring to see a goalie of his I'll say a goalie of his caliber, not like spectacular superstar quality,
Yeah,
but a reliable starting goalie putting up reliable starting goalie numbers.
yeah,
And it's good to see him back in that column. So be assured if you're a Carolina, you know, I don't what's the word I'm looking for? We'll just use fanatic. If you're in fantasy and you like Carolina as your good team pickup, Ronta somebody you should be grabbing up.
yeah.
For me, we talked about him. You mentioned him in the previous one, Jamie Drysdale,
Mm,
for Philadelphia Flyers, and he is hurt, or sorry, he's not hurt. It says he's out with an illness right now, and that's why he's missing game. But uh, in his first 2 games with the Flyers, he's got 2 points. They're both assists. That's not unbelievably hot by any means, but I think it's enough that when he is healthy, it's evidence that he's going to get the ice time and that he's fitting well within their system. He didn't play a super ridiculous amount of minutes. He played 19 and I think 21 minutes in his first two games. So that's still, not a ton. But as he gets used to the system and as he really grows within that organization, I think he's going to get more ice time and I think he's going to put up more points. And I think he's a good young player to bet on right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm Philadelphia. We've been waiting for them to fall off a cliff halfway through the season now, and they're in a top three spot in the Metro. So he's in a winning culture now. That's really good for him. And I definitely think that this is something, obviously, maybe not the point per game pace, but this is something he can keep up, getting a few assists here and there, and maybe finish the season at a 45, 50 point pace. Like that's not unrealistic. I do got a question for you though.
Yeah.
Let's say you're in a dynasty league and you're doing your prospects. Who are you going for first out of Anaheim? Pavel Minchikov, Owen Zellweger, or Tristan Linnell?
Oh,
Rank them.
I'll do Michikov first and then Zellweger at two.
Yeah, I think I agree.
And it's close. It's
Yeah.
so close because there's a lot of good defensive depth that the Ducks have that's ready to just burst into the scene at the right time. And with Drysdale now out of the equation, that opportunity is really going to be there for one or two of them to seize some roster spots. So it's tough. Zellweger at two even just feels off because there's reasons you can give to put him at one,
Yeah.
but I think Michikov just edges him out a little bit for that first spot.
Yeah, and I think the fact that he's already got some experience kind of gives that to me, gives him the first spot for me. How insane is it that you have a defensive prospect to win Defenseman of the Year in the WHL, OHL, and QMJHL? Like that is ridiculous to get the trifecta last year. That's insane, and you already had Jamie Drysdale.
It's it makes you really wonder how the Ducks are doing so bad
Yeah,
when they're clearly drafting so well. So
yeah.
is it just a matter of time before they become a good team, or is this another system doomed to fail because they can't get anything right type thing?
Well,
That's kind of where I'm sitting.
it's got to be the system doomed to fail because like you look at the offseason additions, like they still have John Gibson, who love him or hate him, he's still a good goalie.
He is.
Yeah, Radko Gudas. You still have Cam Fowler. You have the most insane center depth in the NHL. I mean, that's exaggerated, but like you got Drysdale or
You have some insane future center depth in the NHL, that's for sure.
McTavish, Zegras, Carlson. Now you have Cutter Gauthier. You added Alex Killorn, Radko Gudas. Like, I don't get it.
It's it's painful to watch every year from the outside looking in. I'm not like a big Ducks fan, but I'm a fan of young players
Yeah,
jumping into the NHL and playing well. And I'm
yeah.
waiting for them to really do it. So that's mine. I got two more after that. Who do you got?
I have two more as well. I'll go with Michael McLeod in New Jersey. So he's kind of hit or
Yeah.
miss on the points. He's a bit streaky. He'll get you 4 points every 8 games, but they might come in 2 games, right? So for every 8 game stretch, he's good for about 4 points. But he lays a bunch of hits. He's really good at that, especially if you have faceoffs in your league.
Yep.
Michael McLeod is one of the best faceoff guys in the league right now. And yeah, so like he's just very well rounded. He is streaky, a player I typically would stick away from, especially because my two leagues that I'm in don't account for faceoffs. But if you're in a league that really values faceoffs and you have the extra roster spot that you can afford to have somebody a little bit streaky, 100% be looking at Michael McLeod, and he's not rostered very high at all.
No, and that was the one point that I wanted to make about McLeod is those faceoffs. But the last time I checked, I believe he was at 65 point something percent on
Yeah,
his faceoffs. That is
yeah,
obscene. The only person that's really maintaining that on a semi-regular basis these days is Crosby, and he sits at like 60%.
yeah.
So Yeah, if you have face-offs as a category, he's going to almost single-handedly win that for you. Or if you're in a points league, he might be a sneaky depth option.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of clump my other two together for the sake of they're on the same exact team. They're both Stars players.
Okay.
I have Tyler Sagan and Mason Marchment. As far as Sagan is concerned, he's on one of his usual hot cold streaks, but he's on a hot streak right now. 7 points in his last 6 games. He's still playing, in that top six role, so he might not be as available as somebody like Marchment is.
Okay.
But if you're not able to get Sagan, Marchment is still putting up a similar production or a similar amount of points, just a little bit more. He's got 12 points in his last 8 games, and that also includes a hat trick. He's not typically a hat trick type player,
Yeah.
but he has done it, and that means that you might get some extra goals out of him. If you're going to pick between the two, me personally, I would go with Marchment.
Yeah, I would as well. Merchant's been on a tear, and I love to see it. I wish I didn't drop him in the first week of the season because he did nothing.
Yeah, me too.
um, before I finish commenting on that, I just looked up face-off percent leaders. Um, so McLeod's closing in on 1,000 face-offs this year, which is already pretty insane.
Yeah.
And he's at 66.4%, which
Oh,
is
went up. Great.
um next highest that's even relatively taken the same amount is Jamie Benn, who's just over 600. He's at 63.2. And then the only other one that's really close to him is Vincent Trocek, who has about 1,100 and he's at 62%, which is still insane.
Trocheck in general to me is an underrated fantasy player, and if you have the opportunity to get him, get him.
100%.
Regardless of face-offs, he's just an underrated fantasy player to me.
Yeah.
Side comment there.
Yeah. The Dallas boys, they're doing really good. And it's weird to think of Tyler Sagan and Mason Marchment as depth options, especially when they're on such good runs right now. But yeah, they are, and they can be a great depth option for your lineup if they're available in your league.
Yeah, I like the Stars as a whole this
Yeah,
year. I think they can do a lot of damage with their offensive players, but once you get these hot ones, grab them, grab them, grab them.
yeah. Last one I got. I dunked on the Leafs a little bit with Nyes and Domi. This time I'm gonna give a little bit of praise to a player, and I'm gonna say Pontus Holmberg.
Okay.
A little bit surprising. He was put on the top line for the last game, and I believe that when he was put on the top line, that's his first game. No, he scored a goal. Sorry, but he's got 4
Yes.
points in his last 5 games. He gets a good amount of shots on goal, usually about 2, 3, 4 a game, and he gets a few blocks. Like he's just doing everything in your league. Now, is he going to keep it up? I don't know, but he's been doing it before he got put on the top line. Now that he's on the top line, maybe he's going to take advantage of that opportunity. Now he's not one of these guys like we were waiting for to burst onto the scene like Matthew Nyes was, but sometimes these guys come out of nowhere. Look at Frank Vetrano's start to the season.
Yeah, I'm looking at I pulled up his stats for the year, and I was like, I know he was playing a few games on that top line, but I was seeing where he was prior to that, and all the ice time indicates fourth line, maybe third line, and it was as soon as he got that jump up to the top line that he's really showing what he
Yeah,
can do offensively. He's giving that contribution, and I think it's a great example of a player when given the opportunity can produce well. And especially in fantasy, that's something that you can keep an eye on and really pay attention to and
yeah,
get a lot of value out of. So he's not going to be lighting up, goaltenders left and right here, but he'll probably chip in a point every other game, and I think that's
yeah,
worth having.
yep.
That's all I have. I don't have any extra notes. Oh no, we have hot teams. We kind of went through most of the hot teams. Last week, it's kind of the same grouping, but beyond that, Oilers are now on a 10-game win streak.
Yeah,
Kraken are on a 9-game win streak. And then to add to the list, we have the Canucks on a 5-game win streak. So it's the same concept. Look at these teams, see who's hot. There's a handful, especially on the Kraken, that I think are getting back to what they were last year. and you can maybe start getting a little bit of value out of your Kraken team
Yep.
players now, especially.
Yeah. And I will just correct you there. The Vancouver Canucks are on a 1-game losing streak. They just lost to
Uh,
Columbus this afternoon.
well, isn't that unfortunate?
And actually, you know
Still
what?
hot though.
What? Yeah, they're still hot, and it's the Canucks. Like, if you have any chance of getting Elias Pettersson, trade pretty much anybody for him. He's one of the best fantasy players in the league right now. But that just reminded me, I did want to mention Elvis Merzlikins as well. He just got his first start this afternoon since December 29th, and
Yep.
he got the shootout win 4-3. Requested a trade immediately after the game in his media conference. So look for a trade. If he goes to if he goes to LA, he's going to put up some good numbers like Corpusalo did last year. Wow, wouldn't that be funny?
That'd be interesting. I think it'd be fun.
And then he gets a 5x4 contract, and everybody that is a fan of the team that he signs with is going to be mad at him.
Well, until that happens, we'll just see where Elvis goes because he's
Yeah.
a good goalie. I stand by. He's a good goalie that just happens to be in a bad situation. So definitely watch. If not, if you want to preemptively pick him up, if your goaltending is really that bad, by all means, it can't possibly hurt you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for tuning in to this week's episode of Fantasy Forecheck. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your preferred listening channel, as well as the Hockey Writers podcast and YouTube pages, where you can find anything and everything else hockey related. You can always follow me on Twitter at Strozyk67.
And I'm there at Jacob Billington.
And you can feel free to drop us a like, leave a comment. We'll keep you up to date on all things fantasy throughout the year. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. We will see you next time.